Okay, today's the day that we're going to go out to the garden and talk about the hay mulch garden that I'm doing this year. Okay, there's several things I'd like to share with you. For one, this garden was started, this is the third summer, so it's 3 years ago. And the first thing I did was, we have a dump truck. So what we did is we poured several loads of chips on here 3 years ago. And I spread them out by hand, and I let that set over the winter. And then in the summer, spring, I planted a lot of squash in here. I didn't have time to do a lot of things. And so they grew very well. And then the next year, there was a lot of old hay that was sitting around at the wellness center. And so I asked Les if he would just come and dump it on here. So he dumped that, and I spread that all around. And it did really well that year. I planted a few more things. I think that's the year I have a friend that has a fig tree, and not too far from here. We're up on the plateau in Tennessee, and it gets pretty cold. I'd say we're zone 5B, and I wanted to grow some figs, and she's also in zone 5B, and she had this fig bush that was producing really well. I took a couple of sticks that were coming out in the spring, and I cut it in pieces, stuck it in some, they call it rooting solution, and then I put it in a pot, kept it wet with a bag over it, so like it had a greenhouse effect, so it kept very moist. And in just a few weeks, I had a lot of baby fig trees, fig bushes. They don't make it into trees because here they die back every year. And so I gave a lot away, and I planted like, I don't know, 12 of them in this garden. And so this is going to be the second year of production. The first year that I planted them in that summer, they didn't produce. In the next spring, they produced, and this is the second time. The first time I did not cover them during the winter. Last year I did, and some of them it made a difference, maybe 2 of them, and some of them it didn't. So most of them it didn't make any difference whether what I did is I took big cardboard boxes and put them over it, gathered the stems, stuck the box right over it, and then I filled it with leaves and hay, and then put a plastic bag over the top of that and strapped that on. And so I'm not going to do that this year, because the 2 that actually did well were also protected because they were very close to a building. And so I'm thinking that that's probably what did it more than the protection with the box and the leaves. So, but they're coming back really well this year. I plan on putting a lot of mulch on top of them, cutting it back, and then putting mulch on top of it as much as I can. And I'll go ahead and show you some of those. The month is the first part of July right now. And as you can see, we have some figs coming on. This one actually died back completely, and so it's coming back with figs already. I shall have some by the end of the season. This type of fig bush, you should be getting 2 crops, but because of where we live, we're only going to get 1. Here's another one that died back completely, but yet it's doing very well. Let's go over here and look at the other one before we go looking at other things. We'll take a look at this. I have to get through this maze. I never dreamed everything would grow so well this year with all of this hay has done so well. All right, so this is one that came back because we're right next to a building. This is the north side of this building. And so as you can see, these figs are more developed. The bushes are bigger. and it's doing well. So I suggest you plant your figs, and this is the other one that made it through. So you can see there's a lot more figs on this one. And okay, so much for the figs. Let's go into this plant right here, since we're here. This is a kiwi berry. Somebody had given me their plant. They were moving, and so they gave me 3 plants. It takes a male. I had 1 male and 2 female, and the female are doing really well. They're climbing up to this nice trellis that we put up here for them. This is a cattle, I think they call it cattle fence, cattle panels. We hooked them onto a fence rail. What do we call those things? Fence posts. And so they make little berries. They're supposed to do okay in this session. This is the male. The male hasn't taken off too well. It's starting, yeah, here it goes. It's starting to take off. And so that's the male. Kiwi berry. And all right, so the mulch, this hay that we put on last fall, real heavy, before the winter came, kind of tucked everything in with this hay. And of course, this ground has not been tilled for 3 years. And I like the fact that we don't have to till this, because the worms are your greatest maker of fertilizer. And it's what God intended. So it is the best fertilizer that can be made is from worms. And when you till the soil, it actually destroys the worms. It's a myth that they say that you can cut a worm in half and it'll still live. And that's only certain types of worms, but earthworms, they don't live. But yeah, this plant started, look how long it is. This is a kabocha squash, and kabocha squash are my favorite rich tasting winter squash, right where that fence post is, going all the way out. I didn't let it go out that far. I trimmed it so the other side it wouldn't go into the garden. This what we have down here is some composted or aged sawdust. We have a sawmill right across the street, which is very convenient. And so with the dump truck, I don't know if you can see the dump truck. We'll go take a look at it real quick so you can see my husband's dump truck. These are also, this is certain apples and pears that do well where they don't blossom out so early in the spring. Because the problem here on the plateau is we have very late frost, like in May. We usually always have a freeze or a frost in May. And so these don't blossom out so early. They're called limber twig. It's a limber twig variety. Pear is a seckle. And of course, I can't tell you how well they do yet, but hopefully I will be able to tag that onto this video in a couple years and let you know. So there's some more varieties of apples that are supposed to do well. You need to do your research before you plant on the plateau, because things will not grow. And we have deer. That's why they're in the cages at a young age, because they started eating them. All right, this is our old dump truck. All right, here's watermelon, and they do well here. They'll even do better if you use black plastic, but I got them in early, so they are doing very well. And this is something you might want to be interested in growing. These are raspberries, and these raspberries are so delicious. I got this from a nursery in Knoxville. I really wish I could remember the name of it, but it does have thorns, but they're not, I can put my hand on them and they don't hurt me. And so this brand, I got one plant 2 years ago. I planted it here, and it started putting out shoots in the ground last year. So I gathered the shoots and I put them right here this spring. And then there was more shoots coming out, and these they don't look so good right now, but these will look really well. Here, I just did this a week ago. And so from one plant that I planted a year and a half ago, so it was in the fall, this is what I've gotten. They are well worth it, and you want to keep them contained, otherwise they'll just grow and lay on the ground. So I lifted them up with these hay strings that I got from my hay bales. Another thing about the hay is my husband thought I was a little crazy in wanting to use hay, but I had an experience with hay because we didn't have any straw. Straw has no weed seeds in it, but hay is full of weed seeds. And so they think, you use hay as a mulch, you're just going to get weeds. And so I knew that, but I also know that what grows in your area is, as far as the weeds go, replenishes the soil. And so if you can get those weeds to grow, and then you can till them into your soil, you get the minerals and the things that are needed for that area. And so I don't mind the weeds. What I do is when the weeds grow up, I just put down more hay. And if it's a real serious weed, like that you don't want, that you really want to keep under control, like crabgrass, I'll put down a piece of cardboard and then put hay on that, because if you suffocate crabgrass, you can get rid of it. And so I don't mind the weeds, because my purpose is to feed the soil with this hay. And so instead of just letting the weeds grow, I just put more hay down, and then of course more weeds will grow and I put more hay down. I probably have to layer hay down. Well, this year so far I've done it about 3 times since spring. So the initial time during the spring when everything started coming up, I put hay down. So I just roll it out, and it's very easy. Once you get the bale going, it just keeps rolling, and I'm happy with it. I'm real happy with it. I think that there's not only a nutrition that comes from it, but there's some type of I don't know if you want to call it a frequency or what, but I know that different fibers of clothing have different frequencies, and it just seems to be very comforting. I mean, we like to sleep on hay, because there's some places where I have put hay, but yet the soil wasn't very good underneath it, and it did well. And so I know that the hay hadn't broken down into good soil yet, and just because it has a covering, it just seems like it likes that. When it breaks down, the roots from the plants can grow up into the top of the soil and grab that nutrition, because it stays cool with the layer there. It still can just, the roots will come right to the soil. Let me show you an example. The fig roots are, they are surface feeders. They will grow all over the place. So I can dig up a little place, I'll show you right here, where I can dig it up, and I can show you the roots of the fig just right under the soil. So here's the fig. I'm gonna go out about 3 feet, and I'm going to reach in. Okay, now as you can see, this is some really good dark soil right underneath it. And looky here what we have. You see that? That is a baby worm. It's a red wiggler. I had bought some red wiggler worms from Amazon. There's just a bunch of them in here. Okay, so I'm gonna go down. Look at all the red wigglers. Oh, there's a lot of them. They have spread throughout my garden, and they like it because this just keeps going, this good soil. Finally, after about 2 inches of some really dark soil, I'm hitting the soil that's actually here, which is clay. It's a clay soil. So if you want to make good soil, just don't kill your worms. Get some hay or mulch. And I've got all kinds of little roots growing in here. Let me see if I can find the root to the... And here we go. Yeah, look right here in the good soil, in the good topsoil. You can see these are the roots from the fig. So they are very, very close to the surface. They like that rich soil. And so as you can see, some of the problems that I get from the hay. Now this is where I loosened the hay and moved it apart so I could plant asparagus. And the weeds are coming up really bad, but where there's hay, I have no problem. These are my strawberries. This is another thing. These strawberries, I started with 4 plants 2 years ago. And one thing nice, the weeds just pull out of here because of the fact that it's so soft. It's easy to weed if you do have weeds. But anyway, these strawberries, they grow, it's called an everbearing. And I have more blossoms now than I did in the spring. When they first started producing in the spring, they weren't producing very well. I said, oh, I'm gonna get a different variety. I don't like these, they're not producing very well. And so of course I left them in here, and then all of a sudden they started getting more blossoms. And they've been producing all summer, not just in the spring. And this is nice for home use. You know, if you're doing it as a marketing, you know, they don't get that big. And they are, you know, some of them do, but just look at all the blossoms. Let's start out with 4 plants. Okay, from those 4 plants, they send out babies. And those babies, like here's one coming out of this one from this year. You can see there's a whole bunch of babies coming out. And then I took the babies and I planted them. And in the fall, after the summer, a whole bunch came out. Okay, so I dug them up, cut them off, replanted them, probably every 10 inches. Okay, like one here, diagonal, every 10 inches. And so this is what I got. And next year, it's going to be even bigger. So just start out with a few plants, a few raspberries, a few strawberries, and even one fig, because from one fig, I can take this branch here. Well, before I would have done it, I would have taken it from here up. I could get like 1, 2, 3, 4 plants out of that by rooting it, sticking it in soil, and making more plants. This right here is escarole. Escarole is a bitter lettuce, and it's very nutritious. I like to grow things like escarole and endive and a lot of different lettuce. And because the cabbage family has what's called goitogens, and they can slow your thyroid. And this right here is a very nice plant. It's called purslane, and it's very high in omega-3 fatty acid. And I actually planted it here because I wanted to put it in my green drinks. And of course there's a video on green drinks. And let's see. Oh, this is my squash over here. I tell you, I've never had such a huge squash plant as I have this year. I had to cut it off. It's coming into my asparagus and killing it off. So I had to just cut it off on this side. But on that side, I let it grow. As you can see, coming off from right here all the way out there, and it's still wanting to travel. Usually you have squash dies just a short time after you plant it. It'll give you a few squash and then it's dead, because stink bugs really like to eat your roots of your squash, and they kill the plant. But I'm thinking what's going on, because I have so many worms in this garden. I have a lot of robins and I have a lot of birds that like bugs, and they actually eat stink bugs also. So I'm thinking that just how this works, the harmony that's in this garden when you don't have, when you're not tilling the soil. And it's amazing. Let me show you. The first place I put my worms was in a container, but then I decided I was going to put it in my compost pile for this year. And so this is my old compost pile. I just make different piles. I put them around, then I'll cover them and with hay and some dirt and make layers, and then I'll top them off with a bunch of hay and just leave them. And then I let the worms do the work. But this was an old compost pile, and I put some cardboard on top of here just to protect my worms, because I know that the eggs were still in here. I took some of the worms. Let's look at this and see what we've got in here. This is some super good soil that used to be the compost pile. And as you can see, it's very, very, very dark, rich soil, because the worms have done their job in, I don't see a lot of worms. I think the worms have moved on to other parts of the garden, which is perfectly fine. I'm not going to have to stock this anymore with worms. Let's see what's going on here. I like to, when I use cardboard, I like to use cardboard that doesn't have any tape on it, no dyes, no colors. Worms love cardboard. I don't know why the worms have left this. I guess because there's no more food left. Let's see. All right, this is a comfrey plant, and it grows well. All you need is a root, stick it in the ground. You don't have to worry about it, water it. It just grows anywhere and everywhere. It will multiply. Oh. Now, if you want grapes don't do well here on the plateau. Except for, I'm finding, muscadine grapes do well. And so this muscadine plant this is its second year. As you can see, I'm going to have lots of muscadine grapes. And muscadine, regular grapes you want to put like every 8 feet. You can put a post and put another grapevine, but muscadines, no, it's 16 feet, because they produce so well. There's muscadines everywhere. And this is the golden muscadine here. And then I have 2 more babies. We have a neighbor that has muscadines just down the road. And so I took his plants. Trying to get through here. I took his plants and I took from here to here, I cut them off, stuck them in rooting solution, stuck them in the dirt and watered them, put the little, what do you call it? I made a little mini greenhouse for them, covered it with plastic or cellophane, and and rooted them. They were much more difficult than figs. Out of about 25, I think I only got 2. So here are the 2. But these are purple muscadines, and I see my vines are trying to gather together here. But I'm wanting it to climb up on this one. They each have 1, and I figure they're going to go all the way over because they grow so well. There's the other one. Right now I've got eggplant growing with it, but I'm wanting it, as soon as it gets big enough, I will attach it to the fence and grow some great grapes. Muscadines are nice because you don't have to worry about having to spray them. They are, bugs don't bother them, and so they can be organic very easily. All right, so let me show you a difference here. This fig tree, I did not take good care of not making sure that it didn't get crowded. So here's what's happening. As you can see, little figs. They like their space, they like their air, and everything grows better if you give it more space. And when you've got a garden like this, don't expect things to be small. This is one okra plant. It's big, but you look at this one. This little okra plant is crowded. It's not growing because it doesn't have airspace. It feels congested, so it's not going to grow. But this one right next to it, which doesn't have anything crowding it yet, which this is a vine. I'm just going to break it off so it stays where it's at, not grows any bigger. There's a watermelon right there. And I've been trying to break these things off so that they stay away from my plants, but they get out of control sometimes. Everything's going haywire because of this hay. But here is more okra plants doing very well because they're not crowded. Oh, another thing, I just saw a lizard. Lizards are great. And lizards will eat your slugs, they'll eat your stink bugs, and so you want to make an environment in your garden for lizards. Let me show you what I've done. Lizards need shelter and they need water. And of course they need food too. If you've got the garden, you've got the bugs and you've got the food. So here's what I've done. This is their shelter. Okay, they've got rocks. This is on the north side. If it's hot, they can go in there and underneath those rocks and have a nice cool place to hang out. And they need water. So this is what I've done. I have made a little rock ledge here so they can climb up here, they can climb over here, they can get a drink of water. And because we had 3 weeks of no rain here, which was very unusual. And so now I had this set up for them so they would stay and not leave trying to find more water. Well, I think that's about all I can think of. My blueberries here, the shoot came out just since it's been raining. It started raining and they just shot up. And you can use old composted or aged sawdust around blueberries very well. I don't have it in other places. I've got it around my raspberries because there's certain plants that just do not like sawdust. Sawdust can, especially if it gets mixed in with the soil, it will leach nitrogen out of the soil. And so I haven't mixed it, but it seems like it's affecting the plants because I want to show you something here. These are 4 o'clocks. I planted these 4 o'clocks the same time as I planted these 4 o'clocks. So what's the difference? That has hay around it, and these have the sawdust around it. It's not in the soil, but they're around it. And it has affected it tremendously. So live and learn. Now this little garden here, we dug the dirt out of the ditch out front because it wasn't flowing real well. My husband was digging the dirt, and so that it would flow through, not make a flood anywhere. And we noticed that the soil was really, really dark. It had been accumulating, and the leaves have been accumulating, and everything's piled up and just decomposing, and made some really good soil. So we took that soil, and before the price went up on wood, fortunately, we got these ties. And so we bought all these ties and made this and put the dirt around the house to make little gardens. Turned out really well. Now this mulch I got from a neighbor who has pine trees, and I used it also on the strawberries. But it's a very nice mulch to use. So, let's see. One thing about petunias is, if you notice, you plant them and they just, they don't seem to bush out, they don't seem to grow. Well, the trick to it is that you take the dead ones and pinch them off just past the seed pod, and you throw those out. If you do that, they will get, and make sure it has water too, they will get very bushy. This is some basil. And this doesn't get much sun right here, so this is why these aren't doing too well. And this is endive over here. Endive is another very bitter herb, really good for digestion. It's not enough mulch here though, so it's kind of sparse. Things grow better when you mulch them. And one more thing I'm going to show you, and that is my peach trees. This is right here a cherry, but I did not protect it. Just the other day, the deer ate all the leaves off the top. So I got to put some protection around that one. All right, two more things. Almost forgot my wine berries. These wine berries I dug up out of the woods. They are worth it. And I'm trying to see how well they're going to do protecting them and giving them some loving care. See if they're going to produce any bigger or better or more. But I got them from the woods. My woods over here are full of wild berries. See, right there is elderberries. Yes. Wine berries are from Europe. Somebody had probably brought them over here, had a garden with them, and they took off. They traveled over to these woods. They like the woods. They don't mind shade. But they are very, very delicious. I think they're my favorite berry. And there's the peach trees. 3 years old. Can you believe it? How big. Some of them are doing better than others. But these peach trees, the reason why they're doing so well is because I put wonderful wood chips around them. Let's just hope that they're going to bear because of our late frosts. If they don't, I'll pull them out and plant berries because that seems to be what grows well here. Okay, let's go into the area here. I'll show you this last thing here. This is my freeze dryer. And this is something that will preserve your produce and your things for, they say it keeps the nutrition for 25 years, and if you vacuum pack it. And so I freeze, I dehydrate, I freeze dry, and canning's kind of something I don't do anymore because I like to keep the nutrition as much as possible, and I like the raw as much as possible. Raw food is where it's at. And since I like to eat a lot of raw food, you gotta grow it. Otherwise, you can't find good raw food. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to call me, 865-256-5113. I can give you a start of my raspberries. I can give you a start of my comfrey. And if you want to root some figs, you're welcome to get some of that from me. And I can give you some strawberries too, plants. So just give me a call and we'll set up a time. God bless you.